Hey, welcome back, IB International Economics students, to this video lecture. Today, we're going to go over the arguments for protectionism, okay? The arguments for protectionism are also the arguments against free trade, okay? So right here, I have laid out 9 reasons, okay? 9 common reasons. I have given 2 extra reasons from the textbook that governments want to enact protectionist policies and that governments will not want to have free trade, okay? So the first one is protecting domestic employment. Second one is protecting the economy from low-cost labor. The third one is protecting sunrise industries. Sunrise industries are basically new industries or infant industries, and governments want to protect that from foreign competitors. Number 4 is to avoid the risk of over-specialization. So governments don't want all their goods to be imported. So the governments also want to be self-reliant, at least to a little extent. So governments want to avoid the risk of over-specialization. Number 5, strategic reasons, whether it is punitive tariffs like America has enacted on Iran, or whether it is just to for example, economic pressure on a country to change or something like that. Strategic reasons, preventing dumping. Dumping, let me give you a definition. Dumping is the practice of selling underpriced goods to the people in the short run to undercut competition and to gain market shares. Okay, so this is intentionally pricing your goods lower. And governments want to avoid this, so that's another argument for protectionism. Another argument for protectionism is to protect product standards. For example, the United States has rather high product standards for makeup products because they have to make sure it is safe for consumers to use and apply to the skin. So that's why a lot of America has banned a lot of imports of makeup products from China, which has a looser regulations and looser standards concerning makeup products, concerning beauty products. So protecting product consumer standards is also another major reason for the arguments for protectionism. Another major reason for protectionism is to raise government revenue. Of course, when talking about protectionism, we talk about how governments will enact tariffs, and they will enact what we call import taxes. So whenever a good is imported, for example, every time Toyota, the car company from Japan, wants to export cars to America, they have to pay a tariff. Okay, they have to pay an import tax, and this tax will raise the government revenue. So that's another argument for protectionism. Another very, very valid argument for protectionism is to correct the balance of payment deficit. What is the balance of payment? Okay, remember how we calculate GDP, gross domestic product. We use government revenue, we use consumer spending, we use investments. Government revenue plus investments plus consumer spending plus what? Exports minus imports. Okay. So when the import quantity, when the import prices exceed the export prices, we have what we call an imbalance of payments. So in order for government to raise GDP, a form they would do is to tariff or to put import taxes on the imported goods. Therefore, consumers want to buy domestic goods instead of buying import goods, and therefore the elements of exports minus imports would be lower, and then the GDP would theoretically rise. Now, these are the arguments for protectionism, but is it really valid? Are these arguments really valid when we look at it from the economic sense? So take note that when we look at these arguments, the counter arguments on the right hand side right here are counter arguments from an economic sense, not a political, not a humanitarian, not an ethical sense. It's purely from economics, dollars and cents. So the first one, protecting domestic employment. Now, I know a lot of politicians, especially politicians that are more liberal, for example, Donald Trump, right? He wants to protect domestic employment. Now, it is a very good political argument. However, it is not a good economic argument. Now, why is that? Protecting domestic employment is a very good political argument. However, in the economic sense, well, what are you doing when you protect domestic employment? You are putting an inefficient industry, and you are protecting an inefficient industry. And if we do not remember, market failure is defined as when there are any inefficiencies in allocations of resources. So, for example, when back in the 80s, the United States want to protect the local steel industry from the influx of Australian steel, for the influx of cheaper Australian steel. So the government protects American steel by putting tariffs on foreign steel. And this tariff protects inefficient industry because American steel is so inefficient. At that time, it's so much more expensive than how it should be. So in the short run, governments may be able to protect domestic employment. However, in the long run, this will lead to market inefficiencies, market failures, and in the long run, this will also not be beneficial for the economy because the government is prompting up failing industries and ineffective industries. So that's why protecting domestic employment, although a good political argument, is actually a bad economic argument. Another similar argument is protecting the economy, protecting the domestic economy from low-cost labor. Once again, China, India, Mexico, if you live in America, all have cheaper labor. Indonesia have cheaper labor. And the government wants to protect against cheaper labor because they know that cheaper labor will actually cause local jobs and local businesses to suffer. Now, what is the economic argument against this? The economic argument comes from the form of comparative advantage. What is comparative advantage? We talk about comparative advantage is that businesses or firms or countries should produce the goods they are best at producing. And when tariffs and protectionist policies are enacted, the consumers in the domestic field will have to pay more money. So what you are sacrificing in protectionism, what you are sacrificing when you choose protectionism or free trade is that is that your local consumers will have to spend more money. Okay, they have to spend more money, and that completely goes against the theory and the principle of comparative advantage. Now, the third argument against protectionism is, of course, protecting sunrise industries. What are sunrise industries? For example, 5G, okay? 5G development is currently a sunrise industry in America. 5G development in China, okay, is no longer a sunrise industry. Okay? China has well-established infrastructure. China has well-established technology in 5G. Now, America, in order to protect the 5G industry in America, they put punitive tariffs and they completely ban 5G technology coming in from China. Now, why is that? That's because America wants to protect the local sunrise industry, that is the 5G industry, from cheaper, already well-established 5G technology from the technology giants of China. So that is another reason to protect sunrise industries. Now, why is this such a bad thing? Now, when America protects their sunrise industries, for example, when America protects their 5G industry, they are cutting off information, investment, capital, and workers from China that already has the information, that already has the technology in 5G. So instead of having a closed and protected economy, if America opens the economy to Chinese 5G technology, then America will be able to gain the capital, the investment, the information, and the patents to 5G, and America will be able to also increase their understanding of 5G, and everybody will benefit. However, if protectionism is enacted, then everybody will be a lot more bigotry. Okay. The fourth reason is to avoid the risk of over-specialization. What is the risk of over-specialization? The risk of over-specialization is the over-dependence on exports. Okay, for example, Singapore is a very import-driven country. That is where the majority, if not all, of their goods are imported. Now, what's the problem with that? That is that Singaporeans do not have the ability. Okay, they do not have the ability to be self-reliant. So perhaps governments, maybe a bigger government, perhaps Taiwan, will want to enact protectionist policies to be more self-reliant. Now, what's the arguments against this? Okay, what's the arguments against this? Once again, considering comparative advantage, this is completely insensical from economic perspective. However, this may make sense from humanitarian, ethical, or even political perspective. Now, make sure this is an economics and finance channel. This is not a political channel, okay? So, all my commentary does come a certain perspective of an economics perspective. Now, the number 6 reason of arguments against protectionism is fifth is a strategic reason. Now, once again, trade war. Okay, previously we have the trade war between America and China, or tariffs against North Korea. Okay, these are strategic reasons to have protectionist policies. And once again, these are not economical, but there are against reasons for protectionism. Another, preventing dumping. Now, what is dumping? Okay, what is dumping? Dumping is when, for example, let's say Taiwan. Okay, Taiwan produces a lot of cheap rice that is subsidized by the government. Now, Taiwanese farmers take this subsidized rice and they sell it to Japan. And Japan also has a rice industry, but because Taiwan is importing so much cheap rice that Japanese rice farmers cannot compete. And because Chinese rice farmers are subsidized by the government, they are able to dump, which is sell such cheap products into the Japanese market. Now, what's the problem with this argument? The problem with this argument is that this is not an economical sense. Perhaps governments may be able to enact price floors in order to protect domestic industry. Now, that's a political discussion. Number 7, product standards. Oh, I don't have 2 products. That's a typo. Product standards. Product standards are, for example, I've also talked about this in America. We have high standards for makeup products and beauty products. However, in Taiwan, for example, in China, they do not have such high product standards. So, in order to protect American consumers from low product Chinese goods, America is enacting high product standards and protectionist policies to protect its consumers from low quality or sub quality goods. Now, that's another example. Number 8, the rise to raise government revenue. Once again, it's very clear. Import taxes and tariffs are once again dings and methods governments can receive income and receive revenue from. This is the valid point. However, it is also important to take note that whenever a country enacts protectionist policies and whenever a country enacts tariffs, they're usually retaliatory or revenge. Foreign governments will also enact additional tariffs in revenge. For example, what happened in a trade war between America and China. Now, that's it's a lose-lose situation for all. And just go down a streak in a trade war. We keep going and slapping on more and more tariffs and import taxes, out of which is really harmful for all parties involved. Okay, so that's another problem with government raising revenue through importation of taxes and through protectionist policies. Now, number 9 is the correction of a balance of payment deficit. Now, once again, I talked about how whenever the exports of a country is greater than imports, then the GDP rises. Whenever imports is greater than exports, our GDP or real GDP will take a hit and will actually suffer as a result. So governments may want to rise their GDPs or raise their economies by using protectionist policies as such, and that is a valid point. However, you have to consider in the long run, is this a misallocation of resources? Is putting protectionist policies a misallocation of resources and not using resources to its fullest extent? So these are some reasons and arguments for protectionism, as well as some counter arguments against protectionism. I hope this video is helpful. If it is, please leave a like and subscribe. I'm sorry for the rain noises. It is a very tropical area and has been raining a lot. So I'm sorry for that, and I hope to see you guys in the next video where we will be going over more of international economics. Goodbye.